week we had a lecture, and but we were doing so well. We got up to. Jack said, "How many chairs do I need?" And I said, "Well, we've had up to 100, so we'll get more." I'm sorry, Bob. I'm talking as loudly as I can.
I'm just bragging.
I know. Oh, yeah, 4 years. Anyway, but our speaker today is so exciting because I've known about Francis for about 40 years. My husband knew Francis 50-some years. Francis is the world's authority on the ethics of reproductive rights. I mean, there really isn't anyone else like her, and the fact that she's here in Cuernavaca is a gift to us. I know we are on a whole spectrum of how we feel about reproductive rights, but this is a wonderful opportunity to learn and have a dialogue in the end. Would you like me to turn off that fan, open the window? I know that if it's that loud, I know that it's very hard for people who have hearing aids to hear. Can we turn it down? This one? The other one. Okay, so Francis started off as a nun, and she started off as a child, but then she became a nun, and then she has been head of Catholics for Free Choice, but she's no longer in that position. Right. She's a professor of ethics, visiting professor of ethics at UNAM. She's been a professor of ethics and all over, lectured all over the world. So with that, I'm just going to let you start, Francis, because there's nothing I can say about you. She's also happens to be one of my very favorite people in the world. So, and as are many of you, I might add. So.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, there's so much that we could talk about when it comes to reproductive health, and more specifically, sometimes we use reproductive health as almost a euphemism to talk about abortion, because the reproductive health service that is the most controversial is abortion. Yes, there are people who think contraception is wrong. Yes, there are people or groups that think that assisted reproduction is wrong. But for the most part, those issues do not arouse as much passion as the issue of abortion. And I think it's reasonable that abortion is a controversial issue. It's a very tough issue for many reasons. Now, obviously, there are those of us, I'm not saying exactly where I stand, those of us for whom abortion just makes sense. It's like we don't have any big conflicts about it. If a woman becomes pregnant and pregnancy and does not desire to become a mother, or who has health complications or life complications or whatever it is, among us, there are people who are, okay, it's her business, it's not my business, it's okay with me, and I certainly don't want to force anybody, this is one position, to carry a pregnancy to term that they don't want. There are those people. And then there are people who really believe very sincerely that the fetus is a person from the moment of conception or fairly early into the pregnancy, and that we can't take the life of the fetus. Punto. And you can go back and forth with people like that for days, years, hours, all within the family, and everybody comes up with, well, what about this? What about this circumstance? What about that circumstance? Isn't it okay this way? And we try very hard to change people's minds on this. And then there are other people, and I personally feel that this is the majority of people, and I get this varies from country to country and region to region, But the majority of people who think that abortion is something that should be available, but it's a serious thing. It's serious. It's not like having a tooth pulled. It's not like having an appendectomy. It is at another level. And that make distinctions as well, people who make distinctions between what should be legal and what is moral or ethical. Okay. And I'll just say this in passing. Morality and ethics are the same thing. We can talk about moral theology. We can talk about secular ethics. We can talk about feminist ethics. We can talk about development ethics. But when we talk about morality or we talk about ethics, it's the same thing. And we choose the word we want to use, often for reasons. Okay. There's a reason. Some people prefer the word moral, and some people prefer the word ethical. Okay. And some of that reason is religious. There are, certainly within my community, which is a feminist liberationist community, okay, very often the word moral makes us very nervous. Makes us nervous. Because morality has often been used against women. Okay. When somebody says, that woman is immoral, we're usually not talking about her stock portfolio. We're talking about her personal, sexual preferences, reproductive preferences. That's where women and morality get crushed together. And of course, some of us would say, really, her stock portfolio is more important as a moral issue than her personal sexual life, and some would not. And the words come from two different places. Okay, this is what I think is important. The word moral comes from the Latin. Okay. It's a hot word. That's immoral. You don't usually hear somebody say, with passion, that's unethical. Right? Right? Ethics is calmer, supposedly a bit more dialogic. You can look at different ethical perspectives. And the word ethics comes from Greek. And if you look at it, just think about what Latin cultures are like and what the Greek culture is like. You begin to see why those two words, which mean the same thing. What do they mean? They mean what we are looking at with morality and what we are looking at with ethics is what is the right thing to do in a given circumstance. That's the question a moral theologian or an ethicist will ask about whatever the issue may be. What is the right thing to do? What is the best thing to do in this given set of circumstances? So I'm going to start a little bit about abortion by saying a little bit about what I think. Where do I stand on this? I mean, I'm a well-known figure in the field. I have a certain number of enemies who pick the most stupid things I ever said in the 50 years I have worked on this issue and hammer away at what's wrong with me. You know what that woman said? I once called Ratzinger, the former pope, one of the former popes. I called him, what did I call him now? The best mind of the 5th century. I also once said, I spent 25 years of my early life looking for a government I could overthrow that couldn't put me in jail. And I found it in the Vatican. So, I have a reputation. I come with a reputation. But there are a lot of things about all of us that nobody really knows or understands. In the case of abortion, where I stand at this point, and which is how we will talk about this to a certain extent, is that modern ethics, you don't need ethics if there is no dilemma. If something is totally obvious, okay, and we could say that for the most part, shooting somebody is like most people would say, you can't shoot people. Okay. Then we could come to some exceptions, but basically, we're pretty clear that killing other people is not a good idea. So we don't really have to have a big ethical conversation about murder, okay, or about stealing. And we have nuances in that anyway. Person is starving, what should they do, blah, 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 blah. But for the most part, you don't sit down and have an analytic discussion about an issue, invoking various core ethical principles, unless there is a dilemma. If there's a dilemma, then we have to think about this, we have to think about it. And so, from my perspective, abortion is an issue in which there is more than one value at stake. Okay? Too many people only have one value when it comes to abortion. A woman has a right to make a decision, and that's it. And whatever you ask them, what about, they come back at you and they say, well, the woman has a right to make this decision. Or, I trust women to make this decision. Mind your own business kind of thing. That's one segment of the population. And then another segment of the other side of the population has exactly the opposite absolute, which is, we cannot take the life, we cannot terminate the life of a developing human being in utero. And from the moment of conception, the value of that entity is sacrosanct. And the same thing with that. You ask them, well, what about rape? Or what about incest? Or what about ectopic pregnancies? Or any of these questions. And they have the same answer back at you no matter what. And that is that the fetus is a person and has a right to life. And those are these two polar positions that exist. So then, and both of them have value. Okay, I am not here to say that a position that is against abortion, even from the moment of conception, is not a serious question to be considered by ethicists. It is a serious question. In my own view, at this point in my life, I'm interested in the question of respect for life. I want to live in a better world around life than we currently live in. I want to live in a world where animals, the life of animals and sentient beings is respected. I want to live in a world where the environment, which is alive, biodiversity in the planet, where all of these issues of life are seen as serious, and that we act towards all life, babies, mothers, old people, fetuses, animals, etc. We act with some respect for the value of those entities. They may not be persons. Most of those things I have mentioned are not persons. Okay. Now, we have people who believe that animals are persons, or at least they are sentient beings, and consider sentience an important thing. And so, when I think about abortion, I do have to think about respect for life. Respect for life, including fetal life. And the other thing I have to think about is women, and what I always refer to as the moral agency of women. Women have moral agency. They get to make decisions that are important to them. They particularly, I believe very strongly in something called an ethic of consequences. Okay. And what does that mean? It means to me that the person who will suffer the most damage from a decision, whose consequences are at stake, gets to make the decision. And in the case of pregnancy, which is very important, every pregnancy carries with it the risk of death. No matter how rich you are, you can, at some point in your pregnancy, you can face a situation where your life is threatened by the pregnancy. And that varies tremendously from region of the world to region of the world. More women are risking their lives carrying a pregnancy to term in Kenya than in Kansas. But it's still true that the consequences of pregnancy are primarily experienced by the woman. Now, of course, someone who is opposed to abortion completely says that there are consequences to the fetus. And then sometimes the question will come in of, what does the fetus feel? Who is this thing called fetus? I wrote an article once. I had two crazy parents. My parents were crazy. They were not crazy like normal parents are crazy. My parents were mentally ill, period. And my mother should never have had a child. She did not want children. She became pregnant with me when she was 18 years old and single, and was in love with a soldier in the Second World War. I was born in 1943. And she and the chaplain convinced the soldier to marry her, and that's why I'm here today. Okay. Now, and she subsequently had 3 other children, whom she also should not have had. So people often come to me, they come up to me at meetings, and usually people against abortion, like, what if your mother had aborted you? That's the charge that is made. And my answer is, I have a philosophical answer and then I have a practical answer. The philosophical answer is, there was no I. I did not exist in utero. The I who is before you today, the person before you today, is the result of 79 years of life. So that's more the philosophical answer. And the practical answer is this, and we all have seen this. If I could have given up being born when I was a fetus, so that my mother would have been potentially a somewhat happier person than she was with 4 children, I gladly would have done that. Without a moment, because I did not really exist as I. And if my mother would have been happy, I would have been willing to make that gift to her. And we know this about children, never mind fetuses. Very few children, even children with abusive, my parents were not abusive, but with abusive parents, do not want to be taken away from their children. They protect abusive parents from the authorities because the idea of being separated from their parents is frightening. It's frightening. And so this is part of the controversy that we're dealing with. Could I ask somebody to tell me, let's see, we started, tell me at 4:45. No, that's not, that's, tell me at, we're going to end at 5:30, right? Mm-hmm. Tell me when it's 4:45. I'm not promising you I'm going to shut up, but at least you have given me a choice of what to do at that point. All right, so if somebody would do that, I would appreciate it. But I think the most interesting part of anything like this is talking together. And at best, I will give you some stimulus for that conversation. So I want to move from what I just said, which is more generalized. I want to move a little bit to religion and reproduction. Because after all, we're in a church, or next to a church. And people have beliefs about what does religion have to say about abortion. First of all, I think it is so important that any religious congregation, any group of people of faith, examine the question of abortion. There is no doubt in my mind that within this parish, there are women who had to make the decision about whether or not to have an abortion. They may have been making it for themselves, they may have been making it for their daughter, but whatever it is, abortion has touched the lives of some of the people in this parish. And an unwanted pregnancy has touched the lives of people in this parish who need to decide whether to continue it or not continue it. Well, where are they going to get any advice on that? They're not going to get it from the political activists on abortion, either for or against, because those people have a vested interest in holding strongly to one position on the issue. This is a place where religious leaders, where pastors, rabbis, imams, lamas, etc., have something to say and offer to people. And people are interested in what their religious leader has to say about an important issue. So this is the business of a church. The business of a church relates to the moral life and to the answer. You may put the answer in, what does God want of me? What would Buddha want of me? But the point is, you are looking for guidance on what is the right thing to do. So within this constituency here, knowing a little bit more about abortion on all sides of the question would be valuable to members of the community. It is also valuable in a political sense. One of the projects that I have a grant from a division of the Rockefeller family to work on ethics and abortion in Mexico. I've had this for about 4 years now. So why I teach, I don't get any money when I teach at UNAM. And if I taught at UNAM, they wouldn't give me enough money for me to even consider it as part of the reason to teach or not teach. But I have a grant that covers various work that I do on abortion. And right now, you are in an incredible moment in relation to abortion in Mexico. Latin America is at a critical moment on abortion. Legalizing of abortion is moving rapidly within Latin America. The green wave, it's called, and it is happening. So you are one of the states in which I will be working, because every state of Mexico now has to pass a law or a health code related to the circumstances under which abortion will be legal in their state. All the Supreme Court of Mexico has said is you cannot criminalize abortion. So all of the laws in Mexico that criminalize abortion need to be changed. And 8 or 9 states have already done that. Okay? And they have made abortion legal, mostly in the first 12 weeks of pregnancy, with no restriction on the reasons. That's pretty much what the law looks like in states that have made it legal. Morelos is one of the states that has not yet made a decision on what the law here will look like. And my colleagues at UNAM and I have selected Morelos, partly because it's convenient since I kind of come here a lot, or enough. This is one of the states where we are going to work with the legislature on the question of what kind of law should Morelos have. And you're members of the community. You can weigh in when the time comes if you choose. You can decide not to weigh in, which is also your privilege. You may be too divided as a church constituency to act on it. But your voice could have value in this area, especially in dealing with people who, and a lot of people, who are neither against abortion or for abortion. They're in that, people call it the mushy middle. I call it the smart middle, because I think those people are really thinking, and that those of us at the end of the spectrum, with all due respect, we just have this thing in our head, and we just repeat our mantra over and over again. And this doesn't help people in the middle. So we need middle voices, or more voices that take into consideration all the values at stake, not just one perspective on it. So religion is very important. And I think what many people don't know, even people who are religious, don't know is what does their church, synagogue, temple, etc. really teach about abortion? Now, I'm from the Catholic tradition, and I know what the Catholic Church teaches. And it doesn't teach what most everybody thinks. It does teach that abortion under all circumstances, except to save the life of the woman directly, is forbidden. But what it doesn't tell ordinary people is why it is forbidden. It has come to be considered that it is forbidden because the Catholic Church teaches that the fetus is a person from the moment of conception. This is not what the Catholic Church teaches. This is what the bishops say. But this is not the teaching. We have no impact. Historically, within the Roman Catholic Church, there has been no position on who the fetus is. Okay. Thomas Aquinas is one of our greatest theologians. He believed that the fetus was a boy fetus. It got sold at 40 days. And if the fetus was a girl, it got sold at 80 days. Now, I consider this to be the earliest recognition that girls were faster than boys. Because we had to give that little boy fetus a soul at 40 days. So we had 40 days on the girl who didn't get it until she was 80 days in the fetus. So we're really very feminist thing of the Catholic Church. But the reality is, we have never, within Catholic theology, we have never come to a point of being able to say automatically when the fetus becomes a person. And in 1974, the Vatican issued a declaration on procure abortion, in which it said, look, the question of abortion is a religious question. It's not any business of medicine or science or any other discipline to figure out when the fetus becomes a person. That's a religious question. And then it said something very important. It said, and we don't know. We don't know. We have not figured it out. And so that's important in a sense, because Catholicism is the most dogmatic in a non-professional sense on abortion. It is the religion that is against abortion under any circumstances. We've got a bishop here in Morelos who has said if a legislator goes to legalize abortion, he is going to excommunicate that legislator. I was on excommunication rather than abolishing something on here. But the reality is, he can't do it. He can do it because they get to do whatever they feel like. But technically, there is no right to excommunicate somebody for their view on an issue. Okay, so there's that. Some evangelical Christians follow what the Catholic Church says, which is that abortion can never be
But there is almost no other faith group that considers abortion to be absolutely forbidden. Every faith group takes abortion seriously. Every faith group looks at this question of sanctity of life and figures out how to do it. But Buddhists, the Dalai Lama says about abortion, what does the Dalai Lama say about abortion? The Dalai Lama says abortion is justified. And he justifies it, including, this is in the New York Times, including for steady population growth. Including something I don't know. Okay. But he's at a point, you join the consciousness, and you say you're sorry. You know, you speak to the entity, to the fetus, and you say, I'm terribly sorry, but this is what I have to do. But, Thich Nhat Hanh, my favorite Buddhist president of the Vietnamese Buddhist who recently died, was asked about abortion, and Thich Nhat Hanh's response, and of course I'm reading Buddhists who have different views, but what he said is, do that which will cause the least suffering. Evaluate, this is it, justification is valuable. Do that which will cause the least suffering. Will the suffering be greater to the fetus, or will the suffering be greater to the woman? And that's what Buddhists would say. That's the question you should ask yourself. Because Buddhism, to some extent, is about the alleviation of suffering. So whatever morals, whatever you face, you will get suffering. The Anglican communion, Anglican Episcopalian communion, is divided. It's divided. You know, the Episcopal Church in the US of A has said abortion is a woman's right to decide. Formal statement is their formal statement. They have spoken out against the change in law in the United States. In the UK, you know, the archbishops of Canterbury over the last several have all been against abortion. That's quite wrong, you could correct me. But basically, they're saying that abortion is taking life and can't do it. And then, throughout the Anglican world, you have various responses by Anglican communions in different countries or regions. Desmond Tutu, for example, was asked about abortion in South Africa, because South Africa was promulgating a new constitution. And in the Constitution of South Africa, abortion is one of the rights that is enumerated in that. And so a lot of people were well, doesn't Tutu, you know, what you're saying about this, you know, like this to you. And Desmond Tutu said more than once that he believes women should be allowed to make the decision whether or not to have an abortion. That he would like that accompanying that decision is counseling, opportunity for reflection, etc. But he was not for the denial of a woman's right to have an abortion and to have an abortion in good conscience. You know, we one thing to say, well, you can have an abortion, but then you gotta go to confession. Okay. In good conscience, if this is what you believe and you have looked at this issue, then this is not something we should interfere with. So Muslims take very much the same position on that Thomas Aquinas took, which was that a Muslim fetus gets, if it's a girl, it gets sold at 40 days, and if it's a boy, it gets sold at 80 days. And Muslim countries have, to some extent, taken different stances within their religion. In Iran, for example, for a certain amount of time, again, as a Muslim country, it recognizes that life is not inviolable from the moment of conception, Abortion was illegal. And it was illegal because they wanted more kids. They saw a long war ahead of them. And as often has been described, children were cannon fodder. They would grow up, they would go into the military, and they would defend the country. When things changed and Iran was not as actively involved in abortion, this remains the position in Iran to this day. Abortion was permitted. Abortion became permitted. Also, Iran was suffering from some economic setbacks. And again, the link between politics, economics, what a state needs, and what women's individual rights or choices, ability to make decisions, are the subject of laws based upon needs that have nothing to do with women. Nothing to do with women. We have had our own period of population control in which we made a lot of decisions about what women in what countries can have abortions. So religion has a very broad perspective. How are you doing, Carol? I'm right. I'm okay. Hi. And where should we go from here? And so what you see really is that the richness of the conversation about abortion throughout times, that we tend to think, and as I said before, we only hear one side or the other side fighting with each other. And fighting to extreme. I mean, we have had 11 doctors in the United States murdered because they perform abortions. We have had clinics bombed. And we have other experiences that go on. I'll just tell you a few stories from my few visits. I did a lot of work with colleagues in Colombia. Colombia is one of those countries in Latin America was among the first where the Supreme Court decided that abortion had to be legal. But friends of mine, doctors, friends of mine, had a clandestine abortion clinic, a high quality service in the center of Bogota. It was called Orienta. And across the street from the clinic was a Catholic church. The Catholic Church never bothered the abortion clinic. There was no effort to prevent abortions from going on there. There were no pickets. They were allowed to live. And my friend, the doctor who ran the clinic, where we have contributed regularly to the church. And it wasn't because the church wasn't bothering him, wasn't dry. It was because that was what he did. He gave to charity. And the church had no problem taking his money. And then abortion became legal in Colombia. The clinic still exists, but it faces more pressure from the church than it did when abortion was illegal. One of the things about Catholicism, I spent a long time working on this stuff as a Catholic. One of the things about Catholicism is that, to some extent, the greater sin is not what you do. The greater sin is if you give scandal. They say, oh, you can't scandal. Don't give scandal. No, that's bad. My mother, for example, and I'll close with this. My mother was divorced from my biological mother. She remarried a Protestant. All the children went to Catholic school, and at that point, we were taught as children in Catholic school that if your parents were remarried after the first marriage. Sex in that marriage was adultery. Every time you have sex in your second marriage, you are committing adultery, and you are going to hell. So I was worried about my mother. I was never a pious Catholic, but I was worried about my mother. And I spoke to my confessor about it. He said, have your mother come to visit me. I can help her. Oh, I said, Mom, go see Father Brian. He can help you. Well, to tell you the truth, my mother wasn't interested in help. But she went to see Father Brian. And she came back and she said, well, what happened, Mom? What happened? She said, well, he told me that if I agreed to live with your father and stepfather as brother and sister sons, I would receive forgiveness. Because remember, the thing that was sinful was the act of sex between the two of them. It wasn't even that they were bound to the sex, because that didn't matter. But she had her first bite of the apple with my father, and that was the last one. But all the violence for my mind. So that's what he told me. But then he told me I was 12 years old. Then he told me something else, and this is the most important thing. And it's what made me the Catholic that I became. Okay. He said, but you know, you can't come to Mass on Sunday in our parish and take communion. Because everybody knows you're a sinner. You know, they know you're married to this guy and it's not her husband. And you're living together, and their assumption is you're having sex with this man. So you would be giving scandal. And if I gave you communion, I would be contributing to scandal. And preventing scandal is a method of control. There is in religions a desire to control. So I said to my mother, I said, okay, so she cares. And he told me this. Now, I really have no idea of part of your religious words. This didn't register. I wasn't thinking about sex when I was 12. I didn't do that when I was 13. That's not true. But anyway, but I was deeply hurt by the hypocrisy. I understood that this was hypocrisy. It contributed very much to the work that I eventually did. You know, when I'm talking to people who want to say, well, you're not really, you're not Catholic. You're not Catholic. No, not you. And I say this, I say, well, I say there are different kinds of Catholics. Judaism has already figured it out. They have 3 ranges of Judaism and emotions. In Protestantism and Christianity, you have some similar things like that. Go join the United Church of Christ. You want to be progressive, you want transgender people in your parish, you want all these things. So go there, don't come here. Don't want to be vigilant. Don't want to turn forward. Okay, so what kinds of Catholics are there? We only have one church, but we have different Catholics. We have, I can get a spot with this for what I used to say. We have pious Catholics. They love liturgy. The smells and the bells of Catholicism are what makes them happy. They hate the guitar mess. You know, get rid of that guitar mess. I want incense. I want bells, and I want a wardrobe. This is a show. Like when you have the guy here, the bishop here, to do the blessing of the animals, and I was looking at the picture. Well, that's a show. You know, that's a great show. Okay, so there's pious Catholics. There are doctrinal Catholics. There are
Catholics for whom a certain kind of theology and belief is what attracts them. There are social justice Catholics, those of us who are in the tradition of liberation theology. We care about poverty, and we see this as part of our Catholic mission. And then there are, I've forgotten one already, and then there is the final one, which is what I am. There are Catholics in resistance. We remain in the Catholic Church, and our purpose is to change it. Like when I said the only government, I'm looking for a government that can overthrow. Well, I want to overthrow the structure of the Catholic Church.
Have you ever been refused communion?
No. In fact, pro-life Catholics in the United States, and I sometimes use the term pro-life Catholics. I mean, you want to call yourself pro-life, I don't call myself pro-choice. I respect it. But Catholics Against Abortion petitioned the Vatican at one point to excommunicate about 12 or 15 of us. Justice Brennan in the Supreme Court for voting for Roe v. Wade, Ted Kennedy for supporting Roe v. Wade in the Congress, and a bunch of people like that, and Francis Kissling.
You were good company.
Yeah, I mean, this was good company for being great. And the Vatican wrote back to them, and the Vatican said, "We're not doing this." You know what I mean? This is not in our interest to do this. It might not be a problem to excommunicate Kissling, okay, because she's really not, But we need Ted Kennedy. We need those members of Congress. We're not kicking them out of the church. That's absurd. And also the other thing is that, I don't know if people know of somebody called Sonia Johnson. Sonia Johnson was a Mormon, and she went after the Mormon church on women's issues. And they excommunicated her. And she became famous. Before she was excommunicated, she was nobody, just some crazy lady who was attacking the Mormon church. So the church would see Francis Kissling is a crazy lady. But she's not that important, really. But if we excommunicate her, she will become a bigger public figure, right? And so excommunication, like even now, like there are some bishops in the States who are talking about denying communion. I've never been denied communion. And I once said, and it's the absolute truth, I said, if you excommunicate me, I am going to communion twice a day in 2 different churches. And you will never be able to stop me, because we don't, this is not the medieval church. In the medieval church, if you were excommunicated, it meant something. You were outside of the community. It's like Amish people today. If you are in that Amish community and you disobey and they shun you, it affects your life. But the Vatican has no power to affect my life. They have none. I mean, what are they going to do? Put my picture on the chat, whatever it is that is the plate, not the chalice. Put my picture on the plate in every church, which is then shown at every time people walk up for communion. No, it's a meaning. Not for politicians, it's meaningful. Meaningful. To be excommunicated is a problem. Okay. We don't want excommunications happening. But in the ordinary course of events, this is very feminist in a way. You only have the power. If you give them, you can give people power over you. And you can deny people power over you. I have the power that I choose to have relative to the Catholic Church. Okay, I'm done. Now chairs around the room so you can see each other. It's fine. You can take a minute or two to stand up, move our chairs if we want. Why not?
There's coffee ready.
I said this the other day, yeah, we need to get with her. He's got to start charging us dollars.
Oh, yeah.
Don't answer me. Well, no, I trust you, I don't trust me.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Why isn't I rag on you?
So, somebody has to be in charge.
I'm gonna suggest that I do the same thing to you. Why? If you all don't mind.
Nice to see you. Been a long time.
We have another group meeting here at, 6. I suggest we stop at 5:20. So we have time to get ready for that break. So can we get people to come and sit down? Okay, let's do it. So we have 20 minutes. So. Oh, we will. All right. So now,
I want to know
I knew you would be here.
why it appears that the family planning movement and the pro-abortion movement are almost separate. And to me, if there was much more effort put into family planning, abortion would be less of an issue.
Yeah, so of course, I think it would be less of an issue because I think it would prevent more pregnancies. Women would not get pregnant. And it would be, and it would be valuable for these movements to be closer together. It varies a lot in terms of whether they're close or not close. So for example, Planned Parenthood in Latin America. Every Planned Parenthood country, every country has a Planned Parenthood. Pro Familia, blah, 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 et cetera, et cetera. And I've done a lot of work with them because they were, as a family planning association, with a long history of family planning, they did not want to have anything to do with abortion. I mean, what you have in this, where the splits exist, what you have to some extent is more the fear of family planning people that if they get involved in abortion, they're going to lose a lot of supporters. That more people are in favor of contraception than are in favor of abortion. And because most of these family planning associations, even in the United States, by the way, most of these family planning associations are conservative. The people who started them were conservatives. They were wealthy people in their country. If you look at the boards of Pro Familia in Mexico, originally it was all rich people. It was all rich people, and they don't like to take risks. For the most part, they don't like to take risks. So that part of the family planning movement is not to get involved in abortion. I worked a lot in Africa about 6 or 7 years ago. I was contacted by people who, they have received a very large grant. I mean, beyond a very large grant from Warren Buffett. Warren Buffett is the largest supporter of abortion. Abortion. No, he's, yes, pro-choice. Right, in the world.
He's pro-abortion.
He's in favor of abortion, so he's pro-choice. He's in favor of abortion, and he supports access to abortion in countries all over the world.
Learned about that.
And he gave, when I was at Catholics for Choice, he gave me a fair amount of money. And what happened was he went to an organization that works throughout Africa, very, very rich organization, that works on AIDS, contraception, oral rehydration, and a number of other issues. And this organization primarily does social marketing of products. They socially market contraceptives, they socially market condoms, they have cars all over Africa with condoms on the side, and they're very creative, very wonderful. And with all of those issues, they are popular with the ministries of health of the countries that they work in, because the ministries of health approve of that work. And when Mr. Buffett gave this huge grant, I think it was like $400 million a year for 5 years, or whatever it was a lot of money. Because he wanted these groups, this group, to market a drug called misoprostol, which is a drug that is used as a post-abortion treatment. If you're having a problem and the pregnancy, your pregnancy has already, in essence, ended, misoprostol is what you use. But misoprostol can also be used for abortion, and it is. 50% of the abortions in Mexico and 50% of the abortions in the United States are medication now. They're medication, etc. So this is the tendency. And many of the clinics in Africa that this agency was working with were reluctant to get involved, even in distributing a drug that saves women's lives after a miscarriage, okay? Because it could be used for abortion, and because they would no longer be popular. Okay? They're popular for oral rehydration. They're popular for AIDS treatment, but they feared, abortion is mostly illegal throughout Africa, they feared that they would lose their support. And so they hired me to go and work with all of these platforms that they had to help people think critically about what they believed. My goal is not to change anybody's mind. That was a goal at one point in my life, but now I'm at a different stage of life. Okay, and what I want people to do, my experience is that most people do not think about what they think about abortion. They just have an automatic reaction. Oh my God, no abortion, that's horrible. I had a woman stand up once at one of my workshops. I'll tell you the difference. I was at a meeting and there was an Anglican priest sitting next to me. It was a big meeting that the Gates Foundation had put together to talk about family planning globally. And this African priest was sitting next to me. And people kept coming up to talk to me about abortion. It was a family planning meeting. And at one point he turns to me and he says, you're in favor of abortion? And I said, yeah, I think women need it. And I said to him, I made no assumptions. I made no assumptions. I said, what about you? I kind of knew what the answer would be, but that wasn't the approach. I was going to take that question. What about you? What do you believe? He said, I believe life begins at conception and ends at natural death. Life begins at conception and ends at natural death. So it's anti-euthanasia, assisted suicide, and anti-abortion. Okay. I believe this, he said. And I said, I don't try to convince people. I said, that's really interesting. I always tell people they're interesting. I said, that's really interesting. I said, where did you learn that? Where did you learn that? Because I want him to think people would be, oh my God, where did I learn that? Oh, I learned it in the Bible, he said to me. I learned it in the Bible. I said, that's very interesting. Where did you learn it? Where is it in the Bible? Never confrontational. I mean, I can be confrontational. You probably can figure out that I can be a real bitch. But at any rate, I have a job to do. My job, I don't get confrontational. Where did you learn that? Because I want people to think. In the Bible. Oh, I said, where does it say that in the Bible? Can you tell me where you found that? Well, that was it. But the conversation was kind of over. but we didn't fight. And he had things to think about. I had a midwife stand up in another African country and say, abortion is murder. I said, very calmly, oh, that's very interesting. Where did you learn that? Same thing. Did you learn it from your mom? Did you learn it in school? Where did you learn it? And most people do not have answers to those questions because many things we believe, we learned at our mother's feet, so to speak, or we learned in kind of inchoate ways that something is wrong. The message was sent to us by looks, etc., etc., etc. And we've never examined these questions. I mean, I think that's like something a parish can do, is to find ways to bring people together who disagree and do it in a way that is not, I want to understand why somebody believes things differently than I believe. I mean, we all have this. How can you believe that? You say to somebody who has just said whatever it is that they believe. Like, I think we should throw every prostitute in jail. How can you believe that? What do you accomplish by throwing all the prostitutes in jail?
That include all the politicians.
Yeah. Those are appropriate things to ask, to take it to another level or a different issue. Because change is very hard. I mean, I don't know about you, but I have my beliefs, thank you. But helping people to change is tough. Did I answer the question? Whose question was it? Did I answer the question? Yeah. Family planning and abortion, why are they not together? They're together more than you think. Because over the last 20 years, many family planning associations have come to recognize that they have to deal with abortion. But still, I mean, all the people who are working now in the United States, since Roe ended, and have been anti-abortion for a very long time, what they are saying, in a defensive sort of way, is now we are going to take care of mothers and children, so that because abortion will not be necessary, because they can't get abortions. And I have had two responses to this. One is to say, three actually. One is to say, where were you when abortion was legal? You could have taken care of mothers and children then, And what you did basically was when women came to you, you gave them diapers. This is not good enough. So that's one thing. What about that? Another thing really is, what about contraception? If you really want to prevent, I think, generally speaking, it would be preferable not to be in the position of wanting or needing an abortion. Better not to be in that position. Okay, it wasn't on my bucket list. When I was 21 and I was making out a list of everything I wanted to do before I died, having an abortion was not on my list. So and the way to do that is, I mean, one way is abstinence, of course.
Just say no.
Not very effective. What do we call, when we have Catholic joke, what do you call people who use natural family planning? Like mothers. Parents. Parents. So that's what we're, whatever. Okay, who's next? More questions, more comments?
What's going on in Texas?
Please.
Well, it's not just Texas. We have now 16 states who have either reinstituted laws from the 1800s where abortion was illegal because they were still on the books, or they have passed new laws basically prohibiting abortion under almost all circumstances.
And you can rat out your neighbor.
That's right. And the climate, and more states will pass these laws. We will probably see another 10, we'll see half of the states in the country make abortion impossible. And then they're also trying, most of this will fail, but they're trying to, they're thinking ahead. No telehealth. In other words, you can't get pills from New York if you live in Texas. And if we find out that you got them, we'll put you in jail. Or you can't travel to have an abortion. All of these kinds of laws are now under consideration to make it more difficult. We've had some very interesting cases. Like one case that probably everybody knows about is a 10-year-old girl in Indiana, I believe, was raped by her uncle or one of those, somebody like that, her father, her brother's boyfriend, and she became pregnant. And her mother took her to a clinic thinking she could get her an abortion. And she was in one of the states that had a 6-week law. And she was 6 weeks and 3 days pregnant. According to, maybe this is not precise, but that's what they decided, 6 weeks, 3 days, no abortion. And so her mother was able to arrange for her to go to another state and have an abortion there legally. And she went, and the doctor performed the abortion. And the case became known because, this was an important thing for people to know that this is happening to a 10-year-old. And the Attorney General of that state, and this is going on everywhere in anti-choice state, the Attorney General of that state was going to put the doctor in jail, claiming that the doctor had not reported that she had done that procedure because the state had a reporting requirement for rape, which is a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. And actually she proved that she didn't. But, we have laws being considered that will make abortion a crime of homicide.
Crime of what?
Homicide. You're going to go to jail for murder, both for the woman and the doctor. The situation now in many states, the states that are not, pure blue, is that if you go into the hospital with an ectopic pregnancy, people know what an ectopic pregnancy, the fetus or the embryo has implanted in your fallopian tube. Didn't make it. That little sperm went down to the tube, combined with that egg, and they didn't travel. So now the embryo is growing inside this little fallopian tube. And what's going to happen is you're going to die.
The fetus also.
You're going to die. Well, the fetus is going to die under any circumstances because the fetus cannot grow in the fallopian tube. It's not big enough. What will happen is the tube will burst, you will have sepsis, you will have infection, and you will bleed. And what's happening now is in states that say no abortion, or abortion only until 6 weeks or whatever, the woman goes to the hospital, and this happens constantly, goes to the hospital, her pregnancy is diagnosed, it's in the tube, and the first person that the hospital calls is the lawyer. They call the lawyer for the hospital. Can we do this procedure to remove the entity from the fallopian tube. Because the entity has a heartbeat. It's not even really a heartbeat, to tell you the truth, but that's too complicated. But it has a heartbeat, and we have laws now in many states that if the heart is beating, even if the woman's life is in jeopardy, you cannot perform a procedure until that heartbeat stops. And so they call their lawyer. And you know, the lawyers are the most conservative people in the world, especially if they're representing a corporation like a hospital. And so they're like, no, you just have to wait 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, until this is actually life-threatening or the heartbeat stops. This is what's going on in the US right now. More comments or questions?
I just ask a question. Do you think it's because it's been so long since Roe v. Wade that people felt secure, they don't remember what it was like before Roe v. Wade,
Well, they don't.
when our friends went on?
Right. No, why should they remember? You know, like, we're now talking 50 years.
I think that's part of how it's become slaves, it's just a lack of, those who don't study history or do read.
Well, the people who are strongly opposed to abortion, their level of concentration is on the fetus. They're not thinking, for example, there's a fairly well-known woman theologian, who teaches at a Catholic university in the United States, who wrote a long article about this 10-year-old. Okay? And she said in the article, that while it is difficult that this 10-year-old mother, she called this woman a mother, this mother. I went after them on that, but she called, we can't end the pregnancy. We can't take the life of the fetus. We grieve for the mother, but she has to carry it to term. And then she went on about how this is not all that difficult. No, that she will be better in the end for having her baby. That the trauma of abortion would be worse than the trauma of a 10-year-old carrying the fetus of a rapist, delivering the fetus as a baby, and then whatever, and that she's going to be happy that she saved her baby's life. People's images of what other people's experiences are very distorted.
And then there may be a judge who insists that the rapist has visiting rights.
Absolutely. There's a man whose wife had an abortion. I was just reading about this, I knew about it. She had an abortion, and they had both agreed that she was having the abortion. She gave perfectly proper consent. She had the abortion 2 years ago. The couple separated. The man has created an estate for the aborted fetus. The aborted fetus has a legal estate. Okay, right, it's beyond the ability. And he has now gone to court, suing the clinic where the abortion was performed, because he says it was not fully consented to by the woman, which it was, and therefore, he wants money for the estate of the fetus that never became a person. And he's in court.
Like a wrongful death kind of thing?
Like a wrongful death, yeah. What's he going to do with the money? There's nobody,
Nothing else to do.
there's no child to receive this money. It's not like, it's all of that.
I hate to tell you, but our time is up.
Okay,
We're at 5:30, almost 5:30.
I'll come back.
Would you all, thank you so much. So you all come back if we're Oxford, or you talk to someone who has something really interesting to say. I've been trying to travel to do it for a long time. Please let me know. We've got Bob Daly on the hook, but he says I have to get 10 people to sign up before they'll do it. And so it's using your credit card points to travel.
Yes.
And he is a genius at this. Everyone knows he's a genius at this. So I'm sure we'd have 10 people.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
That's right, you can invite people from anywhere and buy their ticket with miles. People can contribute.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm so glad to meet you.
Yeah, you know, I love it.